All right. All right, we are live. It is March 27th, 2015. I think this is my first Hangops in like a month. Last month, few weeks have been pretty crazy. So a big shout out to Chris Weber for holding down the fort and keeping some of the informal Hangops going. Not sure if he'll make it today, but he's definitely been doing a lot of good work there. Kind of fun. Topic today came out of some Twitter discussion about actually using the pry REPL, sort of an alternative to IRB for Ruby, and just that'd be interesting to talk about sort of like how you can, supercharge using your Ruby environment, Ruby development. That seems to be something that most of us folks doing development and operations these days encountering Ruby at least a little bit. Puppet and Chef are written in Ruby. Test Kitchen's very popular. Even tools like, I've seen like stuff for doing Ansible testing and like an Ansible librarian that's a copy of like Chef librarian. So even if maybe your your main development is PHP or you're using CF Engine or something, it's not uncommon for Ruby to get in there just because a lot of the Ruby-based tools in the ecosystem are popular. In fact, Vagrant, right? Vagrant's probably the granddaddy of what we all use, and it's in Ruby. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kick things off with a little bit of insight from a longtime friend of the show, Fletcher Nicol, who, if you're not familiar with, he works full time on Test Kitchen, which in itself is a big collection of various different Ruby, Ruby gems and tools, and so I'm sure he has a lot of interesting tricks because he spends most of his day writing Ruby. So maybe you could sort of give us like the 30-second, who you are, how you got involved in all these things, and then maybe kind of run down some of your, some of your favorite tools.
Sure. So I'm Fletcher Nicol. Currently working at Chef, largely on Test Kitchen, which is, you could kind of think of it as like the least amount of code to fire up real VMs or machines to run your kind of your infrastructure code, your configuration management stuff, when you need to like actually run stuff on machines. That's kind of what Test Kitchen's helping you to do. It was kind of, it was a bit of rage code originally, and at least it scratched my itch. It seems to be helping other people too. So in the Chef context, that's usually used around like testing Chef cookbooks and stuff like that. But I've used that for like recently, like testing Chef DK itself. So it's kind of fun. I kind of got into this stuff kind of through being like a Java developer, and I wanted to write web apps quicker. So I picked up Rails and kind of found like Ruby was part of that, and then pretty much decided I really like this Ruby thing. Found like Chef at that point, which was also Ruby. So kind of once I found, the first time I found Ruby, I've been dabbling in it kind of ever since. So, and as far as Pry goes, I'm trying to remember at what point I found that. It probably when I was doing Rails development. It kind of at first it looks like it's just possibly a prettier IRB, but it's a gem, so kind of why would you bother? I tend to think of it as a bit of a runtime debugger, or a way to actually see what's going on inside like a Ruby process without a whole lot of ceremony. Like as long as you can get that pry-gem into your Ruby gems environment or into your gem file if you're using bundler, like as long as you can get that in there, it's pretty. And if bonus points if you're running your Ruby program process server, if it's like on your workstation and it's like there and it's like it's blocking, so you don't have it super daemonized, it's really, really easy to basically open up like an interactive Ruby session REPL that you can just start typing and messing with your program kind of in real time.
So for those that maybe aren't as familiar, what's the idea of a REPL?
So I guess REPL is what it's read, evaluate, print, loop, I think. Most most dynamic-based languages end up having kind of a REPL that ships with their like language runtime. A lot that even aren't kind of do as well. So um, I think IRB's been shipping with Ruby for, I don't know, maybe forever. Python has a REPL as well. There's like JavaScript REPLs. I'm trying to think, like I've even seen people that have sort of made Go-like REPLs. That maybe it lies a little bit, but uh, it's usually a nice way to like get in and play around with the language without needing to write full files that you're maybe sourcing all the time, or um, when I'm like even working on receipts, I'll use that as my like really expensive calculator because it can do math. It's not always great at floating point stuff all that much, but it's just an easy place to like type things or read in a file and see how many bytes it has, kind of thing. So sometimes it can be like generally useful, and sometimes it's just to kind of explore the language or figure out what the behavior is. So I was using that today to remind myself how to use like Ruby's each method on hashes, and like, do I get key values every time, or do I just get a key and a value? And like sometimes it's just easiest to try it out rather than trying to figure out from docs what should happen.
Yeah, definitely. And my background is sort of more in Python traditionally, and even at Mozilla, right, as a Django shop, I was still doing a lot of Python.
Right.
Um, didn't get as much in Ruby because we were using Puppet, and it's not as common to dive down into Ruby when you're kind of doing basic Puppet. But in Python land, BPython was the one that I chose. There's a lot of people that use, I think it's IPython or IronPython.
Oh,
IPython
yeah.
is like the other one. For some reason, BPython clicked with me a little more, but like, part of the reason to use it over the stock Python REPL was like there's like better tab completion, like could do certain amount of syntax highlighting. It made it easier to like access some of the built-in docs
Oh,
on
okay.
on things like that. The idea of you could import sys, right, and then type like sys dot and then tab, right, and then you get a
Mm-hmm.
tab completion of all like your methods. You start you type a method and you tab again, and it sort of gives you like the doc strings, like what's the function definition, the arguments, and it seems like IRB brings a lot of those same features to Ruby of like, you're not as familiar with the standard lib, you forget like what's in file utils, or like, do I do file.exist or .exists, or like a lot of times I forget like when things need a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll just do like .exist, and something, and then I'll be like, wah, and I'm like, oh wait, So sometimes just like if I'm using a method that I'm not as familiar with, and I'm definitely not as up, sort of like, I don't have as much of that like instinct sort of level of the Ruby standard lib as I do with the Python one. Just firing up that REPL, pulling in a few libraries, and then being able to tab completion style explore them.
Mm-hmm.
And get at the doc strings and stuff, to me is the biggest reason to use a REPL in any language you can.
Well, Pry will help you out as well with that. So you can still do the tab completion and stuff and scroll back. One thing I use all of the time is there's I think it's an alias or a pry command. It's just ls, so just like you'd list a directory. It's got a very like file and directory idea. So ls and then any kind of like Ruby object. So that could be self. You could write self and figure out what, or any object basically that returns ls will show you here's all the methods basically that are on them. I think even instance variables, like usually I'm just looking for methods, but the other nice thing is it will show you if it's a complicated object, it might show you, oh, it had these superclasses and these methods are coming from this superclass, and then you also had two modules that were mixed in with like include. So these methods come from this module. So not only like what could I call on it, but also where did that come from? And I know that's one thing it's just a lot harder to get at in IRB. Like it is discoverable, but probably just like has it right there, which is really nice.
That's also really handy for if you're monkey patching, because sometimes you're looking at the official
Yes.
method calls, but then sometimes it's monkey patch somewhere else, and pry will figure that out for you. That's what I use it for a lot.
And it also has that like show dash method, and then again any kind of Ruby object that happens, to have a method on it, and it will, yeah, I believe it shows you the implementation at that point, even if it was a monkey patch that's flown in. It'll say like, well, here it is, for you to look at, and then here's the source on disk, like here's where it actually comes from. So if you wanted to edit that, or know that, yep, that was a patch, so useful. And it's sometimes something that's really hard in Rubyland to figure out is all these mix-ins and the method lookup hierarchy and the ability to monkey patch sometimes means like I don't really know where any of this is coming from. And pry really does help with that. I guess something else that I use a whole lot is it's hard to like explain without actually seeing it. It's definitely something to try. There's just like kind of directories. There's also a CD method. So if you have, I'm trying to think, you make something like maybe a hash or something. I think this works with standard with core stuff.
Flip to a show desktop, maybe.
Pardon me?
Flip to a show desktop, show terminal.
That's
demonstration.
Google. If it works, I wasn't sure if this gets audio recorded more or not.
I have no idea, honestly, on the usage.
YouTube, we'll see if it works.
I'm not that good of a steward to keep track. So.
Okay, then let me.
If you are listening to an audio only version of this, you may wish to go to the YouTube feed and look at what Fletcher is going to share.
This might get funky. Yeah. Does that window show up all right?
We're good.
Yep.
5 by 5.
Here, I'm gonna pin you.
Just say, let's make a pry thing. So what am I? I'm basically just making an empty project. Sorry.
Brandon, can you make sure to click on Fletcher so that
Yep, I did.
The people talking don't steal the video? That's where it's recorded from.
So is RN?
Oh, this is
or what is that?
If you've used chruby before or like a gem switcher, I'm basically using chruby under the covers, and this is frankly just a little thing. I believe I have it on GitHub. All it really does is it overrides gem home and augments gem path to be like my directory.gem with the right like Ruby runtime. So I kind of wanted the equivalent still of RVM gem sets, but just with a little less ceremony and not making a new subshell. So it was basically my way of saying like I want my gems here, and then if it's already set, I can like kind of back out of it. So yeah, my little implementation detail, but it means when I installed the gem stuff or the pry stuff, it's just right here. So yeah, gem install pry is pretty much
So this is someone I don't know. When you do gem list, is there a way for it to tell you like what's coming from the system versus what's coming from like a bundle install?
That is, well, it's possible. I mean, if we did
matter?
We did a bundle init instead and threw it in the file,
or like or what, which ones are coming from like system Ruby versus the local gem set thing you made.
Isn't that actually just a setting of bundler that you just have it so it doesn't use the system gems?
I think so. Like, yeah, I mean, this basically installed pry just locally into this directory, but it's also using, there's like I installed bundler and a couple things in to the, I guess the global like the system Ruby thingamajiggy.
Yeah.
There probably is a way. Although there's probably a reasonably nice way to figure that out with pry too.
I was just curious, because like sometimes I forget like what's global versus what came from this from bundler or something. I don't know.
Typically, it doesn't take long, and I've got gigabytes worth of gems.
Yeah. I like putting like I mean this is changing with Chef DK, which I still haven't quite converted to, but like I always kind of liked putting like like gem install chef and like my knife plugins and stuff, I like them global.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't have to worry about like, if I have a bunch of knife plugins, like I didn't have to worry about adding them to like every cookbook I'm working on.
Right, they're like in one place.
So.
I also believe, I guess as a point of trivia, that Pry is in Chef DK. It might even be a dependency in Chef, like the normal Chef Omnibus packages. I can't remember. But I'm pretty sure it's around in the Chef DK. You might have to add something like so it's on your path, but
Chef Shell might use it, or someone was saying they want to switch.
We're going to make that happen. I just want to make that happen.
Cool.
So yeah, Pry, it's basically like similar to IRB. So there's so like I can call self, and I get this main thing, which I guess is like, well, I don't know actually what it is. I guess I'm just in an object in main. I guess that's how that works. But if I made a class like, I don't know, I could make a class. And then I can have, so I could, you can just type stuff like kind of a normal REPL. I could say myclass.new and save it off to something like that. So this ls stuff is if I had, I have this this object that maybe I created or invoked. So you can basically ask the object, hey, what methods do you have on you? So that you know what you can call. The tab completion also works, so that's a lot of what's kind of in kernel and other things. There is a way, I think, to get like absolutely everything. Let's see. Globals?
Verbose.
Oh, okay.
And Michael.
Too bad it's not -L.
Details in the chat.
Oh, let me open that. Oh yeah, gemless details. Okay, so another nice thing is like I'm in a Pry session, but like I could go back out to try that. If you add a dot, then that's basically the equivalent of like shelling back out. So now if I do an ls, I get this is like this is me like basically shelling back out and running just normal Unix commands. You just add a dot on the end. So if I had something like let's see. I made a string and said there. I could call back out to echo, and I think I need to string interpolate that. These are silly tricks. Sometimes like I'm making something like a temp file, and I like want to see if it's actually there, so I might do something like this to see what's actually my temp directory without leaving Pry. But anyways, I think what I was going to show was we're in this kind of main context of a program. We've got our C object. You can basically cd into that thing, which now if you call self, I'm now the object. So it's kind of, I guess you could think of it as like, I don't know, popping a new stack frame and going into that. So now if there was anything internal to this thing, you could invoke like private methods and see instance variables on the inside, or call code in the context of that object. So if you need to figure out from like here, how do I get to that other thing over there? That's just a nice way to pop in and try stuff. So then if you exit out, then you're kind of back where you were. So I use that all the time. Now the other thing that I do, so before this call I was actually in some test kitchen code trying to figure out some stuff. So I actually don't have the Pry here, but this was in some code for running kitchen diagnostics. So it's a bunch of data manipulation. So I was just running running this diagnose.
So you're using, is it Tmux that you got going on here?
This is, some Tmux. Yeah, Tmux. And Vim are typically my go-tos.
Okay.
Is there a pry.binding that basically allows you to put a breakpoint in your code
that
you run and then loads it up?
So yeah, that's basically what I was gonna do. Is I've got at least in my Vim profile, it's bang bang p. It spits me out that line because that's how much I use it. So um, I don't even bother throwing the require at the top of the file. I just sort of like inline it here. So that's where like pry needs to be. If you're in a bundler project, you need to have like pry in your gem file, or as long as it's around, if it can be required. That's pretty much all I do, and then I just go and run my program.
Why does every line end with a tilde? Is that just your new line marker?
Oh, yeah, that's my.
Okay.
Oh, where the heck was I? Diagnostic. Yeah, I've been playing. I had really nice stuff, but then there was some UTF-8 nonsense with Tmux being ridiculously slow like 2 years ago. So yeah, it looks a little funky, but that was like I'll figure that out one day.
Okay, cool.
Um,
So this is like a breakpoint.
Yeah, so you could think of it as a breakpoint. Like there are other gem plugins where you can call like step and then start to like work your way down. I don't tend to use those necessarily as much because usually I'm like, this code is like it's terrible. But I was just prototyping like, can I get the right data structure that I'm after? So you can do stuff like, so I've got these like instances and like there are a lot of stuff. But I could call, I know it's an array, so I could just call instances.first. Maybe save that to a variable. So this is surprise also, this output is also not something you get in like a stock IRB. So it's showing like here's all the instance variables and the objects and their kind of internal state. So I guess I'm maybe skipping over that, but that is super awesomely useful depending on what your needs are. I was just going to save this off, so I got this as a variable, my instance, and I can ask like what methods can I call on it. So that's a bit more of a complete example maybe of some object you've never seen before, and what you might be able to call on it.
I like it lists the instant variables, so you can, besides the methods,
Yeah.
here's...
And so like if I had some method that I couldn't call, like I might be able to, maybe state file doesn't show up. You know, I could try and call send, but then I need to do the instance variable get. It's probably just easier to like pop in, be the instance, and then take a look at state file. So like rather than trying to figure out like how do I get to that thing, like just go into the object and take a peek. And if you're satisfied, then you can like pop back out, and then you're back outside the object. So there's also stuff like show methods. So if I have no idea, oops, diagnose plugins was something that I was like just working on. So yeah, you could think of it like no one's seen this code except for me. But I kind of deal with other Ruby gems and libraries and stuff all the time, and this is pretty much how I explore it now, because I'm very lazy and it just gives you everything you probably want right there. So if you're like, how does this method work? Just ask Pry to like show you, and you'll see the from line. It even gives you like the line number and the source on disk where the thing is living. There is even a way I think to edit that. I just don't use that quite as much. Does somebody here use the? There is like in editor, crazy.
Could you? It's maybe not pry, but could you say class kitchen : instance def diagnose plugins and just redefine it, monkey patch it on the fly, and then could we see what?
I think you could. Well, you could definitely do a what is it, class eval? Plugins. Well, that's going to be an interesting string. So maybe it's not class. Is it eval class or meth? No, I can't remember.
You can definitely monkey patch classes right there too, for sure.
This is why so it's not going to show up there. Yeah, I thought it was class eval, or maybe it's. This is actually no. That's patching the class.
Michael said edit class
Given
bound.
Michael
Michael said edit
given
class
object.
bound.
Pardon me?
Michael
Oh.
in the chat said my edit class
Yeah.
sharp method.
Let's try that. Well, look at that. So it is relying on your editor or visual environment variable, but I always have that set to the same editor. So whether that was Emacs or Vim or it was like TextMate way back at some point, but it would pop you up in it, and I think it's even kind of smart about it might do some class reloading. Like that's not guaranteed. If you end up doing any Rails development in the Rails console, there's a lot of nice tricks where it just reloads classes for you. So it's kind of nice to play with, and I think this might do a little bit of it, but because I wasn't totally sure for sure, that's why I don't tend to do this too much, is I usually just have my editor over here, kind of like prototype what I think I need there, and then like you can type exit, or I'll sometimes do quit program, which like if you're popped in a few levels deep or have lots of binding.pries or a binding.pry that's in a loop that's going like 1,000 times, quit program's usually the nice way to like get out. Oh, it's no reload. Okay. Yeah, see, I feel like I probably use 2% of pry, and it's still so compelling. Actually, to the point that, at least for Test Kitchen, if you happen to have pry around, there is this kitchen console subcommand, and all it is it's a pry session. You're just in this kitchen config object, which is kind of like where all the objects get created out of. So that's why I can like call instances on it. And basically, before there was a command line, before there was like a CLI for the library, I was just using this to like invoke the methods and stuff, and be super lazy. So I could ask like map over all the instances and give me their driver.names, I think might work. That's like getting the Test Kitchen driver and then calling the name method on all of them and just give me that back as a collection. And then maybe I just need like the set of them, and I didn't know about the set standard library thing. You could do something like that. Because if that's what you're after in your code, now I've just like kind of prototyped it, and I can like go up and down, and if I really needed to, I could just ink that and then like put that in my editor session, and then I'm kind of like off to the races, and then try it again. So I tend to be in these pry sessions an awful lot of the time. So this does work on, I mean, it can work for things that are daemonized away from you. If you had, say, like a chef run or a Rails server, like maybe Unicorn, that might have like forked itself off. There is I believe it's called pry remote. Does that sound right? Have other people used that, or remote pry? Let's see. Pry-remote. It uses like DRDB under the hood. So it's basically some magic that you can get your service that might have like been daemonized off to block and wait and call, I think it's pry-remote is the command you get. And through kind of the magic of Ruby, they find each other, and then you like wire up to that remote session. So you can kind of use it a bit like a remote debugger. It's not perfect, and it's better if you're on the same box, but that is pretty darn nice. There's also,
do you customize your pry much? Does it pry have a .config file?
I believe there is. Frankly, I haven't really, because I guess again I think I probably use about 2% of it. The only time I've tricked anything out was actually making this console to do a custom prompt, and I think that was. I remember where I did that. there's code in here in the console stuff. So yeah, there are ways to add other things and to customize. And I used to have, I think I still have a reasonably customized, like this is my IRB session, and you can see it's already tricked out with like other gems, and if they're not available, they don't load. And I was ready with Rails 2 and 3, and they're not loaded because they're not colorized. But I found with Pry, like I just got so much of what I needed that I didn't even bother.
Sam Kotler, who is over at DigitalOcean and is one of the RubyGems.org project folks, pointed me to his Pry config a while back on Twitter. I put that in the IRC channel.
Oh, nice.
But he had a few what looked like interesting things in there. It's been on my list to go check out. He had like custom prompt and just a few tweaks. Looked like similar stuff to like there were. I saw there were a couple different older sort of in the pre-Pry world, like packages of gems for IRB that made it nice.
Yeah, like
I used when I went googling a little.
And
yeah.
I was using Interactive Editor a whole lot, which lets you. I could type like VI and then a file, and it would give me like a buffer, so I could do VI like test.rb, and then write it, and then when I wrote it and quit, then it would return source the file, and then I could like use it. I guess a trick like that in Pry wouldn't be bad. I would probably use that if it was like if I had it right at hand. Let me just see if I add this into the project. There's also this Pry Stack Explorer, which is really good when you have no idea what's going on. Whoops. So if you've used sort of more of a like GDB or a GUI debugger before, where you get access to like all the stack frames and you can kind of go up and down, this is pretty much the, I guess the missing piece for that. Let's see if this shows up. Show stack, I think is what it is. Yeah. So you can see that like this is where we are in this method right now. But how did we kind of get here? It kind of goes through all these method calls. So if I wanted to, if I thought the problem was maybe in the perform method, how do I go to this? I honestly can't remember. Oops, is it help? I believe so. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Pry, like just typing help, you already get like a whole lot of useful information. So that's why sometimes I don't remember all the shorthand, because like help's just there. So frame, I think, is what I was looking for. I can also ask where am I if I can't remember and all this stuff is scrolled, and it'll show you like here's the code. This is where you were. And if I'm like I need more context, I need like 10 lines of context on either side, you can just sort of like widen that out. If we wanted to look at the, was it show stack? Yeah, so the stack frame, and I think it's something like, oh, what was the command again?
Frame.
Frame, that's it. Frame. Okay, yeah, so I just went to frame. It's saying now I'm in frame 3 of 13. So this is the perform method from this thing, and this is what this looks like. And line 56 is where the thing like went off to the other method and popped the other stack frames. So I could go back and say like, what was the value of class again? Like, okay, it was that. And did this stirconst thing show up right? Like, yep, that showed right. And if I wanted to go back down, I think this frame 0 would pop me back down. So it's sometimes a nice way of figuring out like, well, I'm down here and like, the value of this piece of data is like totally not right, and why is that, or why did the wrong thing happen? Sometimes
you can binary search to look for the data that's getting passed down through and see where it's screwed up.
Yeah. So it's great for like, especially working with other gems that you've never seen before or don't fully understand, that may have some documentation or no documentation. This is sometimes a nice way to take a look through stuff. So I've put binding.pries in almost anything you could possibly imagine, including gem files to figure out how bundler did something. I've put it in Rails routes.rb files to figure out like why is my the routing thing I set up in the DSL not working right. I've put it in like Burks files to like diagnose stuff in Burks shelf and or at least to understand better what I can do. I've used it a lot in Knife to figure out how to like duplicate options from like a Knife plugin that I was subclassing because like I want all those options in my options and like I don't know how to do that, so just like open pry in the right spot and figure out how to do it. A good rule of thumb if you use pry or you want to try is if you have a problem, install it, insert this line, and then see if that solves your problem, or see if it gives you more insight, because it probably will.
I could also see it be the jumping around would be handy for methods and classes that just pass around options, and it's like, okay, if you do it right, it just works, and how the hell is it working? You have no idea until you go and see, oh, here's the entire contents of the hash.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we did something like, so I've got this code. It's using bundler to pull in stuff, and I am super curious. I think there's like a problem in like the net SSH code that like I'm calling, or I don't know if the right option's coming in. I will sometimes use bundle open for this. All it's basically doing is using bundler to figure out where's the path for the gem, open that in your default editor. And this might be evil, but like I kind of do it a lot if I really need to. Is like drill into the at SSH start or something like that. Yeah. So if I really want to figure this out, drop a pry in there and just wait till the code is actually in there, and then you can check like this options hash. I might want to just keep. I'm just going to background that because if you're not careful, you end up with binding.pries all over in the gems, and you can call gem pristine to clear it, or like nuke those and do bundle install to get them back again. It's a little bit up to you, but if I did, I really want to wait for this thing to boot. Yeah, but I won't bother with that one. But suffice it to say, you can drop in here, check and see what like host is, user is, options are, and the crazy thing is, once you're here, if there was an option that was missing, you could like mutate, like update that options hash, add the thing, type exit, your program keeps running. So from that point on, your new option that you just added on the fly like is basically flows through. Or where I've used this is sometimes an extra option that I didn't intend got into this, so I need to like delete it out of the hash. So I'll just try that in pry, like delete the the extra key. Type exit and see like now does NetSH work? Okay, it does. So I need to whitelist just that one in the code before I call the thing.
Cool.
It doesn't always have to be your own code.
Yeah. It seems like we could spend a couple hours on pry.
Yeah.
Which certainly might be what we want to do, but are there any other, are there other sort of go-to things that you're using? Because most of your day is spent writing Ruby, right? Testing Ruby.
Boy. Well, I guess, does anybody else have any tools that they go to?
Yeah.
I kind of, I like finding new stuff as well.
Anybody? Pete Cheslock? What do you do?
Pete must have tricks.
No, when I saw on the Twitters you were talking about pry, and so I figured I'd pop in. Also, just to say happy birthday, Brandon. So.
Thank you.
Oh man, happy birthday.
But yeah, so I actually learned about pry a few years ago, actually, as regards to Chef. So I was, doing something with a Chef template, and someone was like, I was trying to figure out like the node attribute or something I was trying to deal with, and someone was like, oh, just use pry, and I'm like, what is this magic? And so pretty much used it and like you said, Fletcher, being able to like drop, binding.pry into like a Burks file to like kind of learn a little bit about what it's doing. But I drop them into chef recipes like all the time, and I'll do that as like part of like a test kitchen run. And then from there, it's like you can drop it in in a template. You can drop it in the recipe. And what's nice about that is when you there, at least in the chef world, is you get access to the full node object. So all of those like derived attributes and stuff that happen, which usually is where issues arise or whatever. But I've also used it a lot for like chef search related. So testing out chef search like with Chef Zero in Test Kitchen before I like make my changes and push them out to prod.
Holy cow! Ah.
Oh yeah, because I'll do the like you could stub like node data, right, and then Test Kitchen loads it in, and then you can do chef search. So the stuff I was doing was like trying to write a library to basically make like partial search simpler for us. Because wherever we use partial search, we really just want the IP address. So, and then partial search is now kind of in Chef 12, so it's like they kind of changed the like method or whatever that you call a little bit. So, but I was like, oh man, it's kind of like a long thing you have to type in for every cookbook. I'm like, I should just make a little library for this. So, so it was a really big help to be able to get into with Pry and like actually run chef search commands. And with Test Kitchen, it's all the node attributes that you put into the system. So, but I've also done it like in a fairly hacky way on like dev systems where I just like upload a cookbook that has like binding Pry in it, and then like go to that node, run chef, and then
Nice.
interact with like a real chef server. That's like a last ditch effort of like I just need to get on an environment versus like an out of Test Kitchen.
Yeah, I must say that I used to use that a lot more, but now there's this slight disconnection when I'm sometimes running chef code, as it might not be on, on my machine, which makes it a little harder. Although I will say chef spec, if you happen to be using something like chef spec, which is unit testing like a chef cookbook on your workstation and it's kind of dumbing stuff out, Pry works great in there too, because you're running RSpec at the end of the day, and it'll just stop right there, so you can say, yeah, what's in my node object, or.
That's really sweet. The other place I was gonna say I use Pry a lot is with Sensu. So when if like a Sensu check or a metric fails for some reason, and I need to get to see the actual event data or something like that, and I want to like run it. I want to run it on Sensu, whatever, and so I'll just like pop on the Sensu box and drop a binding Pry into the actual plugin that's going to run, and then it'll actually run the metric check or whatever, and like give me access to all that data so I can like iterate through and stuff. That's pretty helpful.
Couldn't you use Pry Remote with Test Kitchen?
Yeah, so I've never heard of Pry Remote.
Then you could like kitchen login and attach it up.
So there's let's see, I modified this gem file, yeah.
That would be pretty sweet if that's the case, because the way I do it now is like I'll put it in there and then I just connect to I'll put binding Pry in and then I just connect to the node and run the like ridiculously long like chef client local mode version, all the flags and stuff. So it's there's an alias for it, so I don't there's probably a better way.
Sounds like it'd be awesome to just drop off a bin stub so you could just run something, which is the same thing Test Kitchen built. That sounds like that would be useful. Okay, that's filed away. It is Pry Remote is the thing.
Yeah, I mean that would be pretty sweet if in Test Kitchen when you do that converge, because like that's the issue, right? If you put binding Pry and then run Test Kitchen, it's going to just hang, right? Because you don't have like the interactive session.
Yeah.
But if there was almost like a flag you could pass where you're saying like there's going to be there almost like look for this binding Pry or attach to it or something.
So let's see.
That'd be pretty cool.
Let me just go back to this. So there's two windows going, because I have a feeling I know what it's going to do. If I run the list, I bundle install to get the thing. Must not be... Okay, one extra gem at the end of the day. That's not bad. where was the thing that I was running? Diagnose, I think so. Yeah, so you'll see there, it was like, I'm running the thing, but now I'm just like blocked. And you'll see there's this druby URL looking thing, so that's basically it's DRB in Ruby, and I can't remember if somebody here remembers what that stands for. I think it's like distributed Ruby.
Sounds right. That's most times.
I think it's just remote pry or pry remote. There's something with the ordering.
Is that output on the VM? So is it trying to connect localhost of a VM?
Yeah. So right now, like I ran this kitchen diagnose command, which is so I've got a Ruby process. It's blocked on my machine. It's just waiting. So you could think of this as like you could be running a Rails server or a Chef client run that like forked off. So you might not be interactively sitting at that blocked process. And I think that pry remote by default will look on localhost, and there is some weird, crazy Ruby discovery stuff that like if you're on the same machine, you'll see that it actually wires itself up pretty decently.
Is there a flag that you can pass to pry remote with like the IP address that you want to connect to or something?
Actually,
so,
exactly what I was thinking of seeing. I bet there probably is.
Because I mean, if that's the case, I mean there almost has to be, right? But because if that's the case, then at least manually wiring it up with Test Kitchen, I guess I'll have to play around with this a little bit. Wouldn't be too hard. And then like future feature requests for like just tying that together because Test Kitchen's going to know the IP, right?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. It might have problems with ports.
Kitchen pry. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking like you could probably throw together a little gem that would just build up a tunnel for you real quick, wrapping like klogin. Or well, that's my alias is klogin.
Yeah, right.
I have like bundle exec alias to BE, and then I have like kitchen alias to BE kitchen, and then I have that alias to K.
That's cute.
Well, and then I have a few. I have like KC and KV and KD. I'm all about like the 2 and 3 character aliases.
Yeah.
I like bean them together.
Typing's so hard. Typing's hard. Why do you want to type? I just want to type in like one thing. I know I've gotten lazy when I actually do like Control RK and like that's like knife, whatever or something, or it's like I just want to type like one letter instead of 2.
Well, at least my current CSH config. I can't do because in CSH by default, like when you go up, it narrows based on what you're typing. That plus like the recursive history search don't seem to work together. It's like one or the other. I need to see if I can fix that. Although I've been thinking about switching to fish. I don't know. So, but see, that would be ideal. Is like search based on narrowing. But no, I think like you could probably even like wrap this up in like a little gem, like a little kitchen plugin gem. To sort of like simplify the like wiring up the what port it is and stuff, and maybe just an SSH tunnel.
Now I'm gonna spend time on that. That sounds awesome.
yeah, and I can't imagine with like NetSSH and stuff, it can't be that hard. Or I mean, you might even be able to make it that much easier, right? Test Kitchen is your baby. Like hook put some hooks in a little deeper. But yeah, it seems like. Then what you got to do is go patch whatever it is in the kernel that like any exception kicks off pry remote. If anything dies anywhere, it automatically invokes pry remote.
There is another pry gem
that does that.
I think on a raised exception that would have bubbled up like an uncaught exception. I think it can like launch you in a pry session right there. I haven't used that one quite as much, but it probably would be damn useful if you're like, I don't know where this is coming from.
Yeah, that plus remote, it's still something.
Well, that and the getting the stack frame is you can be like, okay, well, it died here, and going back up, like, what was the line in the, popping back up the stack to figure out how did I get in this terrible position. That would be pretty nice. I know that for when I was doing more Rails development, those kinds of plugins are great because you get like a weird exception raised and like you don't know why in development mode. It's great to just be in a pry session and figure out what's wrong with your model or like did a validation fire incorrectly or who knows what. So yeah, there's no end of depth for fun you can do with pry.
Like this morning, I was testing something and like my converge failed because I'd forgotten to make an encrypted data bag.
Oh yeah.
So then but then sometimes when the converge fails, it can I don't know. I feel like sometimes the way the converge fails when it dies. At first, I'm like, wait, what happened here? I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm still new to this, but having it shove up, pry seems like it.
Well, that's what I can't remember. I think that probably a little bit by accident. I think that Chef Omnibus might contain pry. I know Chef DK for sure does. Well, I'll tell you for sure. It's probably in, what is it, lib, Ruby, gems. This is, mind you, possibly an old version. It's odd that there's two versions there. Yeah, there's a version of pry in there, and that's just Chef. So it makes lots of things kind of more possible. This was, I think one of the reasons why maybe Chef Shell, it is an IRB-based REPL for doing Chef-related things, but if it actually was backed by pry, that just makes things way more interesting. That sounds, if somebody is interested in looking at that, especially if they happen to be going to ChefConf and want something to hack on, I bet there'd be lots of happy people who would want to help with that.
Sure. The pry remote stuff?
Well, pry remote's one thing. I'm just thinking turning the Chef shell
into a pry shell.
Yeah, because I believe this is just a you can see my IRB IRB-RC magic stuff is firing, so
I swear
basically
I heard
IRB plus other.
I thought I heard someone at Chef talking about replacing Chef Shell with pry instead of IRB. So
I know Joshua Timberman has wanted that, and I totally have too. But I think now actually there's no extra dependencies to pull in. I think it's just along for the ride now. So
yeah, I think it was actually it was Julian Dunn, I think, on Twitter was saying that they were thinking about making it the default.
Be nice.
In a pry thread that we were talking about. So we're getting to the top of the hour. So does anyone else want to give any other tools, like a quick shout out as to a look in later type of thing, or is this pry seems to subsume most of what the magic happens? No? Okay.
The one thing I can think of is at my place we install RVM to allow the apps to run custom versions of Ruby.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what other companies are doing? Of how do you forklift in non-packaged versions of Ruby with Chef or Puppet? Do you use RVM, change Ruby, and how much? It's like, do you guys have Ruby installed, the version of Ruby for the application installed by your orchestration management?
So we actually use Capistrano to install and deploy RVM on our application servers, and that makes it really nice because it's handled by the developers instead of on the system side of things. So I don't have to know what version of Ruby they're running or anything. It's just part of the Capistrano deploy. Yeah, we looked at a couple of things, like having some sort of, globally installed RVM, and then we install the Ruby with Puppet or whatever. And for a long time, I was maintaining my own Ruby package that was basically just a forward-rolled version of the Ubuntu Ruby. But that's when they're like, hey, let's move to Ruby 2. I'm like, okay, well, Precise doesn't have a Ruby 2 package, so it was a lot easier just to go let's just switch to RVM, and then you can use whatever Ruby you want, and I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, I think the one reason we install the version of RVM, but Capistrano installs the version of Ruby, and I think one thing that are pondering, or it's they would is, well, if Puppet installed the versions of Ruby and we just had Hiera say this project requires this version or these versions of Ruby's installed. When we do a cap deploy, if it's hitting the box for the first time, we don't have to wait for it to compile. So
Yeah.
that's a path we're exploring. Though also we've been exploring RBN as well, doing that. So
Yeah, they're all a little different.
It works
and
now. It's
solving kind of the same
stable.
thing. Yeah.
Baby
I
steps.
definitely have literally used them all. And you can tell that because I've pretty much written a chef cookbook to cover them all. And then I don't use one as much, and then people still are using it. So, yeah, it is definitely possible to use those tools, and it's still kind of a hard thing to have multiple Ruby runtimes on a box. Like you'd think with all the effort, this would have gotten much easier, and I think it has, but it's still kind of complicated. When I started looking at this, there was no omnibus chef packages, so I was installing RVM and then writing an RVM cookbook to like then turn around and manage the rest of it. So like get me just enough Ruby to get chef installed, and then turn around and manage that thing that was like already set up. So it was really twisted. At least it's a little bit easier in the chef world now that chef's Ruby is like sandboxed off in like some other package. So you can at least install a software distribution of Ruby, or RVM or RBM, or kind of whatever you want. That at least is nicer. I might be wrong, but I think that Puppet has some packages with a similar strategy now, or they're about to come out. Or
I think for Puppet Enterprise, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it just kind of leads to
do.
cleaner management if you don't know what you're going to get on the box or what version you have, or if your application requires a version of Ruby, but then your CM tool needs another version of Ruby, but you only have one system install. It's like all these problems.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. If you're on Ubuntu, Brightbox has a really good PPA with the different ones. I don't know if you can install them all simultaneously, but they do maintain builds of Ruby 2, 2.1, 2.2. That's one. I have a Docker or a Ubuntu Precise Docker image I maintain for my own stuff, and that's one of the first things I learned. That, and there's a PPA for like the latest Git and a few things like that. The other thing is you could potentially, in your CI, you could sort of like use RVM and into the build, and you could just roll that all up into a big fat deb or RPM that you plop and opt and just adjust your paths appropriately in your passenger or thin or whatever. Just sort of Uber vendor it. We sidestep a lot of that by using JRuby, and then Radle, makes the Uber jar of everything, or the Uber war or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It sucks it all into one artifact that goes in Artifactory and gets deployed as a jar. So you said Chef Column Hacking. I will be there. Tuesday I plan on doing the community space. For those of you not in the know, Chef Conf is next week in Santa Clara. Tuesday is a day of sessions and community space and training and things. Wednesday, Thursday is like the official conference. That's the keynotes and the talks and the different socials. There's a couple different social activities on Wednesday night. And then Friday, I believe, is like an open hack day. I don't know if it's at the convention center or if someone else is sponsoring the location, but sort of like 4 days of things. I'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Tuesday I'm planning on doing a open space session on mental health. There's certainly been a lot of that and burnout and things, and so I'm going to open that up, talk a little bit about some of my own experiences with mental health and depression, and those of us in LA certainly are still reeling from losing one of our local members, Carlo Flores, just a little over a month ago, right before Scale, and I just think it's a timely thing to be a part of the narrative. So we're doing that. The other thing I want to maybe hack on is I have some ideas about how to maybe package server spec tests as gems to share them between like single node test kitchen type stuff and then like multi-node like integration environment testing. So I'm probably going to be hacking on that my downtime throughout the conference, and I plan on going to pretty much every session or talk on testing of some kind. Wednesday and Thursday, I think you have a couple, Fletcher, I plan on going to, so I'll be around if anyone wants to chat and talk. I imagine we'll organize at least some kind of fight show thing with Nathan to record stuff. So, see if you're going to be around. Definitely hit me up. Hangops, hanging out, hacking, all kinds of good stuff. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Fletcher, that you're excited about for it?
Well, I'm getting pretty close on I think a pretty epically large Chef Kitchen or Test Kitchen release that will let you run and test stuff on Windows, which is one of the many new things that you can do that you couldn't do as cleanly before. So I also have a talk there that I got to get a bit more prep done around, but I'm just sort of excited to kind of to come back to the Chef Conference this year with an answer for people who want to do Windows stuff. So I've caught myself up, I think, a little bit in the Windows community from like 10, 15 years of not really being all that present, and I don't even recognize it. It's actually kind of, there's some very nice things about it. PowerShell was one of those nice little surprises. It's interesting. So yeah, if you want to have chats about that and you happen to be at Chef Conf, then come find me.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, it should be a fun time, and we'll see if the Hangops next week. It's kind of up in the air right now because literally that's my only day back at work next week. But if my plate's not too full, I may try to hop onto a recap of some kind. Otherwise, we'll be back in 2 weeks. So thanks everyone. Thanks for your time. This is really cool. I've got a lot of Pry stuff to go poke at maybe on my flight. Try to upgrade my Pry config a little. Thank you, Fletcher, and everyone else.
Cool, thanks.